Today we're talking about artificial intelligence, and given the nature of the creation that this is, I believe it's important to examine it and think about it a little bit more before we invite such a thing into our lives. Now it's really interesting, I think, when we're looking at something to examine the language that we use about that thing. So let's take a little look at the definitions that we have given ourselves for artificial intelligence. Now, artificial is defined as being made or produced by humans rather than occurring naturally, especially as a copy of something natural. The second definition for artificial is insincere or affected. Now, our definition for intelligence is the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. And the second definition is the collection of information of military or political value. Now, I find those two second definitions very interesting. So let's have a talk about that for a minute. So we've created this invention, this computer invention, that is an artificial mode of gathering and using knowledge. Now, what's the big difference between us and a computer? The largest difference is that a computer doesn't have a human soul. A computer is not connected to source, and a computer never will be. Now, one of the things about our soul is that it connects our energy to our emotions. And so when we're learning any of the lessons that we learn in life, our emotions are connecting to our soul. So all of the information and data that we are collecting as we go through our daily life and learn lessons and enjoy joys, it's going not just into and through our emotional body, which is going into and through our physical body, but it's also going into our soul. And that data is ultimately collected by source at the end of our physical life. And that information goes back to the Great Spirit. And that information is used by source. Now, when we create artificial intelligence, there's no connection for source to use. So that's an interesting point of difference that we have automatically. Now, let's talk a bit about artificial creations that we've made before. Some of them are fabulous. I remember seeing, of course, we've got artificial limbs which have transformed people's lives who've lost a limb. And I remember seeing a great documentary about a dolphin who was given a new flipper that was an artificial flipper, and that transformed the dolphin's experience. He could swim again. It was beautiful. But there are other artificial things that we've created that tell us a bit more about the experience of artificial creations. So let's, for example, take a look at artificial plants. It's one of the most commonly used artificial things in people's lives. Anyone who has had a plant at some point, you can see I've got a couple behind me, at some point or other has had the thought, oh, this would all be so much easier if I just had plastic plants. Now, why is that? A real living plant that's part of the natural biosphere of the planet requires things from us in order to survive, if it's to live inside with us. It requires movement around the room in order to get various amounts of sunlight. It requires water. It requires food. It requires compassion from us, investment in order to look after the plant. Now, compassionate feelings about a plant are something I don't know that we can reproduce in a computer. But having compassion for the life we can program compassion, but it's not connected to our physical biofield. So there's just little nuances here which are very, very important, and I think it's important to redefine those. One of the reasons that plastic plants seem so appealing is because they require no effort from us. So there's a certain amount of laziness that makes something like an artificial thing appealing. So when we create artificial plants, we don't have to water them, feed them, trim them, take them outside, or in any way look after them. In fact, they require almost no compassion or care on the part of us. Now, that tells us something about the nature of the relationship. When we create something artificial, in this instance, we want something that gives something to us, but we don't have to give anything to it. So it's almost a selfish thing that we've created. We want the illusion of greenery in our house, or the greenery in our house, without having to do anything, without having to commit anything of our emotional selves to it. I think that's a very telling thing too. Now, of course, when you break it down, we all know that plants give us oxygen. So a real plant is actually giving us a huge amount of beneficial resource in return for the energy exchange that we give it when we tend it. However, that is not received with an artificial plant. So the message that we're getting here is when we collaborate with the natural world, we're not just giving without anything being given back. We're actually receiving as well. And I think a plant is a classic example of this in the natural world. The world is abundant with plants, and any little amount of effort we give to a plant is returned to us, tenfold, especially with food plants, but obviously all plants provide oxygen for us. So it's important to remember, so when we've created something like artificial intelligence, that there's a certain amount of laziness and selfishness that has come out of the nature of the creation. Now, many people will say, well, it's faster, it's speedier, it's able to do all of these sorts of things. And it's true that we have created something that is very efficient at reading algorithms. However, it hasn't grown on the planet. It's not organic. And even a computer that's attached to something organic is still not organic. Now, there was a famous experiment done in Japan with fungus, and Japanese engineers had been trying to work out the most efficient route to go with the Japanese, with the underground train system, how to get from A to B with the quickest possible way. And in the end, what the clever Japanese people did was used fungus they mapped out all of the spots where the stations and towns had to be, and then they put a fungus and they put sugar in the spots where the towns and villages were, and they put a fungus in. And this plant went with the most natural and direct route into the train system and was a model for the train system, and they since have used that as the actual structure for the engineering of the layout of the train system. So it's not to say that the natural world and the intelligence of the natural world cannot be used for our own benefit. Of course it can. When we're doing incredible things like that, we can actually use the natural world to benefit us, but we're still using the natural world. So that wasn't done with algorithms on a computer, that was done using nature's intelligence. And nature's intelligence has been hard won over many, many thousands of years. And we're repeatedly told by generation before us and indigenous wisdom holders before us that the structure of Earth and the way things work here on Gaia is with nature, that the only way is to go with nature. So it's not to say that we can't have technology, we can't have advances, but it is to say that we're better off using the natural world as our guide and the natural world as our framework, rather than selfishly getting out of the effort of having to do something and creating something artificial. And the other thing about an artificial intelligence system that is something certainly that should give one pause, apart from just the language that we use about it, is that there are no emotions attached to this. The emotions that are being attached to any decision that a human being is making. Remember, we were talking about plants and actually having compassion for that plant. Oh, poor plant, I better water it. Oh, its leaves are all droopy. These are emotions, and these can't be duplicated because they can't, the connection to a soul and to the oversoul of the earth can't be duplicated. That's a human thing that has been hard won, once again, hard over many, many thousands of years. The development of the human race has been given to us and our ancestors, and it's been accumulated knowledge over a very long amount of time. And in fact, after a certain amount of knowledge is gained, you develop something called wisdom. And I think it's important to ascertain that there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. I've got very intelligent friends and some of them aren't very wise. And I've got very wise friends and some of them aren't very intelligent. So the definition of wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment, the quality of being wise. Wisdom is gained after many, 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 many goes at the same thing. I would never trust artificial intelligence with anything in my home or life. I just wouldn't. I don't think it is wise. I don't think the wisdom has been gained. I don't think an artificial intelligence machine has ever given birth. I don't think it's ever been a parent. I don't think it's invested in the emotional future of my family or the generations to come afterwards. I personally think that wisdom is something that's very, very important, and that's why there's that saying with Native Americans about 7 generations in the future. If we give machines the ultimate control over us, we're having a very grave effect on the most important thing that we have been given here on third density, which is our free will. Now, personal sovereignty is something that was fought for in the American Civil War. And the War of Independence as well. The right to look after yourself, the right to be yourself, is very, very important. The free will that we have been God-given here on earth, to be free and wild. This is one of the most important things here, and to give up our personal sovereignty to a machine, any machine, be it a car, be it a tractor, be it a computer, is just initial laziness, which is ultimately missing out on something, because there's a give and a return. When we choose to look after something, we receive something in return. Now, just remember that free will is the most important thing about living here in third density on this planet. The ability to decide whether or not you're going to look after something or not. So I leave you with these words. Till next time. Bye.